There are moments in life that seem harmless when they happen. A joke shared over cheap coffee. A careless sentence written in anger. A goodbye that feels temporary. And then there are the years afterward, when those tiny moments grow claws. By the time Daniel Mercer turned 63, he had become an expert at arranging his life into neat shelves. He lived alone in a quiet flat overlooking a narrow London street where buses hissed past rain-darkened sidewalks. Every morning followed the same rhythm: tea, newspaper, toast, silence. He liked silence. Silence never corrected him. Silence never reminded him of the things he had ruined. People often said memory softened with age. Daniel believed the opposite. Memory sharpened itself like a blade left too long against stone. Especially certain memories. Especially Evelyn Hart. He had not spoken her name aloud in nearly 40 years. Yet there she was again one wet October morning, appearing in the form of a cream-colored envelope waiting in his mailbox. The handwriting was unfamiliar. Inside was a short letter from a solicitor. Mr. Mercer. You have been named in the partial estate settlement of Mrs. Margaret Ford. Please contact our office regarding materials intended for your possession. Daniel stared at the page for a long time. Margaret Ford. Evelyn's mother. Dead. The realization unsettled him more than grief should have. Margaret had always seemed indestructible, a woman of sharp eyes and sharper opinions who carried herself like someone perpetually disappointed by the world. He remembered the first time he met her. He had been 19. Cocky. Loud. Certain of his own intelligence. The sort of young man who mistook sarcasm for wisdom. Evelyn had brought him to her family's countryside home during university break. He remembered the green hills, the smell of old books, the expensive silverware laid carefully across a long dining table. And Margaret watching him through dinner like a scientist studying an unstable chemical. You speak very confidently for someone so young, she had said. Daniel had smiled. Confidence is free. No, she replied calmly. Usually it is borrowed against future embarrassment. At the time he laughed. Years later, he realized she had been right about almost everything. The solicitor's office sat above a florist shop near Holborn. The woman behind the desk handed Daniel a small package and several documents. There is one complication, she explained carefully. The primary item intended for you is currently withheld. Withheld by whom? Mrs. Ford's daughter. Daniel felt his chest tighten. Evelyn? The solicitor nodded. She refused to release it. What exactly is it? The woman glanced at her papers. A diary. A diary. The word landed like a stone dropped into deep water. Whose diary? Then he knew. Adrian Cole. Of course. Or perhaps he fell for the challenge she represented. Their relationship burned hot and unstable from the beginning. Long conversations turned into arguments. Arguments turned into reconciliations. Reconciliations turned into colder arguments. She accused him of cruelty disguised as humor. He accused her of emotional manipulation. Both were probably right. Still, for a while, they loved each other in the chaotic way young people often do, mistaking intensity for permanence. Then came the weekend at her family home. Then came the tensions. Then came the breakup. Daniel told himself afterward that it had been inevitable. But inevitability is often just hindsight wearing expensive clothes. Several months after the breakup, Adrian approached Daniel outside a lecture hall. I need to tell you something, Adrian said. Daniel immediately noticed the discomfort in his voice. What? I've been seeing Evelyn. For a moment Daniel simply stared at him. Out of everyone. Not Adrian. Never Adrian. The betrayal felt surgical, clean, precise, devastating. Yet Daniel smiled. Congratulations, he said. Adrian relaxed slightly. I didn't want you hearing it from someone else. How considerate. They stood awkwardly beneath the stone archway as students passed around them. Finally Adrian said quietly, I value your friendship. Daniel nodded. But that night, alone in his room and furious with humiliation, he wrote the letter that would haunt him for the rest of his life. A vicious letter. Cruel. Bitter. Self-righteous. He accused Evelyn of manipulation, mocked Adrian's morality, suggested terrible things about both of them. At the time, writing it felt satisfying. Like revenge. He mailed it the next morning, and spent decades pretending it did not matter. Weeks later, Adrian was dead. Officially, it was ruled suicide. He was 22 years old. Daniel remembered the phone call, the silence afterward, the surreal feeling that the world had shifted slightly out of alignment. Adrian left behind a short note discussing philosophy, responsibility, and the logic of ending one's own life. Everyone treated it like a tragedy wrapped in intellectualism. Daniel treated it like something distant. At least outwardly. Inwardly, another thought whispered endlessly. Did my letter matter? He buried the question beneath work, marriage, routine. Years passed. He married briefly, divorced quietly, built a career, grew older. And slowly he edited the past into a version easier to live beside. That was the strange thing about memory. It did not simply recall. It revised. The package from the solicitor contained several photographs, old documents, and one final note written in shaky handwriting. Daniel. Memory is not the story we tell ourselves. It is the story that survives us. Margaret Ford. He read the sentence repeatedly. Then the phone rang. A woman's voice. Older now, roughened by time. Hello, Daniel. Evelyn. After 40 years, he recognized her instantly. And most people never fully understand the consequences of their own actions. Months later, Daniel returned to his ordinary routines. Tea. Newspapers. Silence. But something had changed. He no longer trusted memory as completely as before. Nor did he entirely distrust it. Perhaps memory was not a record. Perhaps it was a negotiation between who we were and who we needed to become in order to continue living. One evening he sat by his window watching rain slide down the glass. And for the first time in decades, he allowed himself to think of Adrian not as a symbol of guilt or tragedy, but simply as a young man who had once been alive. Brilliant. Curious. Human. Gone too soon. Daniel whispered into the empty room. I'm sorry. The city outside continued moving, indifferent and endless. But somehow the silence afterward felt lighter. Not forgiveness. Not peace. Only understanding. And sometimes, late in life, understanding is the closest thing we get to redemption. The end.